order the meeting of the Newburyport Public Schools School Committee for Monday, November 9th, 2018. Mrs. Kennedy, would you please call the roll?
Mr. DeCantia?
Here.
Mr. Cole?
Here.
Mr. Newman?
Here.
Mayor Holliday?
Present.
Mr. Hawkeiser?
Here.
Mr. Reardon?
Here.
And Mr. Callahan is absent.
Thank you. We have a quorum. Could we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And before we start our meeting, Mr. Cole has asked for a few moments to recognize an amazing man and longtime teacher who passed recently in our school system, and I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Cole.
Thank you, Mayor Holliday. I respectfully ask for a moment to remember Mr. Richard E. Doyle, who died on October 27th in St. Augustine, Florida. He was 77. Mr. Doyle was born, raised, and educated in Newburyport, graduating from NHS with a class of 1959. He then went to college, graduating from Keene State College in 1965. After graduation, he entered the teaching profession, which he loved, and taught for 37 years at Newburyport High School. He taught social studies, economics, and theater arts. Later, to colorfully document his years at NHS, he wrote the book, Winston Churchill Was a Catholic Priest, which detailed his many humorous experiences as a teacher. Mr. Doyle also served as president of the Newburyport Teachers Association and once told me that his tenure was an education in itself. For many years, he served as the faculty advisor for NHS, the high school yearbook. He directed several student musicals that were all well received. A supporter of all Clipper sports teams, Mr. Doyle was a lifelong fan of the Red Sox, Patriots, and Celtics. After his retirement in 2002, he pursued many of his interests to include painting with watercolors, writing articles for local newspapers, teaching genealogy, and teaching the men at the Essex County Correctional Facility in the educational program there. At his Florida retirement community, he directed musicals. Closer to home, he was a proud member of the NHS Alumni Association, where we worked together as officers. Mr. Doyle came from a family of teachers. In the classroom, he always presented with great enthusiasm and was encouraging and supportive with students. With family, he looked to be the most supportive and helpful brother, uncle, and great uncle that he could be. He especially enjoyed spending time with his grandnephews and grandniece. May we have a moment of silence for Mr. Richard Doyle. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks for that recognition, Steve. We have now moved into our session of public comment. If there is anybody who's here who has a comment that they would like to share with the school committee, we ask that you step up to the microphone, give us your name and address so that we can keep a record of it, and try to limit your comments to about 2 minutes. Seeing none, do we have any warrants, Mr. Cole?
Yes, we do. We have 3 warrants. The first, I move that the following named bills and payrolls of the Newburyport Public Schools amounting in the aggregate $15,691.51 be approved for the city auditor to make payment and deduct the funds from the school's account. There are no conflicts.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye. The next warrant, I move that the following named bills of the Newburyport Public Schools amounting in the aggregate $27,010.96 be approved and forwarded to the city auditor for payment. There are no conflicts.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye. And the last warrant, I move that the following named bills of the Newburyport Public Schools amounting in the aggregate $535,567.09 be approved and forwarded to the city auditor for payment. There are no conflicts.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
We have a set of minutes from our November 5th business meeting. Do I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion, changes? Mr.
Yeah,
Cole?
this one, on one of the public comment participants was the physician, and her name correctly spelled is Christine Riccardi, MD, FAAP, as in fellow American Academy of Pediatrics. I've already supplied Ms. Kennedy with a correction.
We have a motion on the floor to accept the minutes as changed, altered. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passed unanimously. Before we turn over to staff and faculty recognitions, I do want to give to the community a change in our agenda. We are not going to be discussing district goals tonight. With the absence of Mr. Callahan and the impending departure of Mr. DeCanter, we really feel we should be here as a full school committee to do that, so we'll be postponing that. Turn it over to Superintendent Gallagher.
Well, thank you very much. As part of one of our initiatives is to recognize staff and students throughout the school year at Committee of the Whole. And the students we wanted to recognize tonight are not only their great academic achievements and great academic students, but they're also student athletes, and there are many banquets there going on. So we're postponing the student recognitions for a future date when it gets less busy for our students. But I do want to recognize an employee in my short time and knowing Miss Riccio, who we're going to recognize. She always goes above and beyond the call of duty. She's always looking for researching to find better ways, reaching out to other districts to find the best practices, and then also uses state and federal grant funding to support a lot of the work. In her tenure here in Newburyport, she was instrumental in the Safe and Supportive School Grant. The trauma-sensitive classes that have been brought to Newburyport. She brought the information on PBIS and shared it with the district leadership team. The farmers market, that's been a great success this summer. Ms. Riccio had spearheaded that. She works collaboratively with youth services, Andy Egmont, on a daily basis, and is also working on the Home for Little Wanderers partnership. She's piloted this year, which I tested out myself, the use of, for the vision screening, a new technology that can diagnose vision problems for our students. We piloted this technology, and we identified students with vision problems that would not have been detected without this use of technology. Reached out to those families, especially at the younger grade levels. That's where students are learning how to read, and if there's vision issues early on that go undetected, it can lead to further problems down the road. She's also the monitoring and providing a program to monitor all the nursing visits throughout the district. It's a great data tool that we can see throughout the district. You know, why are students going to the nurse, and are there more that we can do throughout the district? And now this grandparent support group that's been spearheaded by Andy Egmont, and Kathy Riccio has also been going to those meetings. So she's been bringing some innovative programming to the district over the years. And what's great about Kathy Riccio, she's got a great heart and will go to great lengths to make sure it's going to help our students. So at this time, I'd like to have Kathy Riccio come up, and congratulations. Thank you. Well, why don't you come on up? You don't
As in all the way up.
enjoy the spotlight. We're gonna take a photo op and
Oh, okay, well, geez, I should know that with Sean, we do it all the right way.
Angela's a photographer too now. Curriculum instruction, yeah.
Get in the middle here.
That's right.
That's great. I'm just going to move this chair and this chair is right in the middle
All
of
right.
you there. Good.
All right, so thank you so much for everything you do.
Had more people respond to the picture I posted from last meeting than every other post I've had Facebook really combined. Facebook does it. It's like Instagramming Facebook.
To be continued. The next item on our agenda is the coordinated program review wrap-up. Sean, if you want to introduce how we're going to do this.
Student rep.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Not to worry.
I accidentally checked it off, so I'm sorry. We have our student rep here.
Thank you.
Despite my not calling on him. He's here.
So I've got a few points I'd like to address tonight that are going on in the high school. Quick congratulations to both the boys and girls cross-country teams for an awesome season. Both teams were able to compete in the All-States meet this weekend. The girls finished 9th in the state, and the boys came in first to lock in their first ever state championship title. All 4 grades are currently preparing for this year's Color Day. To help students better understand the history and tradition of the day, students created a special edition of the Action News and interviewed past alumni at the park lunch. We got to watch this today during advisory. Last week, the senior members of the football team, along with their coaches, school, and district administration, participated in the traditional pre-game luncheon. This was sponsored and organized by both Newburyport and Amesbury's Rotarian organizations. The high school is hosting its first ever showcase on November 29th from 6 to 7:30 a.m. This is an open house for all middle school families to come and learn about everything the high school has to offer. It's a great way to learn about the ins and outs of the high school for students soon to come. Over the past 2 weekends, the drama department has had successful showings of Spamalot. The show involved 3 months of preparation. The cast and crew did an amazing job, and in 2 weeks, they are right back at it to start production of Marcus is Walking. Tomorrow night, the Sailbot team will hold its yearly dessert auction. This will start at 6 p.m. in the high school's cafeteria. That's pretty much the gist of what's been going on at the high school. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Zach?
Did you say the first ever showcase at the high school?
I believe so, for middle school families. Could be
Is that
wrong.
true? 8th graders have never gone up to high school?
Maybe it's like the first of this year.
I had it.
No,
It was a different approach.
Right.
So they had like orientations before for grade 8 families to come up. But it's more of a showcase, open house versus formal presentation.
So I was just one that happened
We're
last
rolling
year
it out
too. I
to
was just
all grades
curious.
in the middle school as well.
Okay.
There's going to be some teachers using their maybe science probeware. PE teachers want to show off some equipment down in the gym, so a little more hands-on with staff, hopefully from each department there in the evening. And tours, students will lead tours as well.
Great.
Great. Sean?
Yes, so at this time, we've been talking about the coordinated program review, and going through the process. And as we said, we really wanted to take a look. There's a few areas, and I think at the last school committee, we wanted to really highlight a lot of the great things that we're doing, and we were recognized for fully implementing in all those 3 areas. But there were some areas that we were partially implemented, and we had to develop a corrective action plan, how we're going to address those throughout this school year and for future years. So at this time, I'd like to have Christina Gentili, Director of Pupil Services, to kind of give an overview of the different areas that we're going to be working on throughout the year.
Angela's my wing woman. Thank you for having me. So I just have a few slides, and I believe that you all have a copy of the Coordinated Program Review Report of Findings as well. All the documents are available on the Department of Education website as another resource for the community. So the Coordinated Program Review is conducted by the State Department of Education every 6 years. The purpose is to assess the degree to which we're in compliance with federal and state requirements in 3 areas. It's special education, civil rights, and ELL. And the result, as Superintendent Gallagher mentioned, is a plan for correcting any areas of non-compliance. The on-site review was April 9th through the 13th. Prior to the on-site review, there was a self-assessment component that was very comprehensive, time-consuming, very thorough. That involved an internal review that we conducted of our own files. And then the on-site review they conducted interviews with approximately 41 staff and administrators. They reviewed student records. They also conducted observations of classrooms and building tours. And the Department of Education sent out parent surveys as well. You can see here the number of criteria in each area. So special education is the largest area with the most number of criteria, followed by civil rights and ELL. I also want to mention, and I'm sure that Assistant Superintendent Vick can echo this, that we had the assistance of a number of staff, again, the staff who participated in the interviews and took time out of their day. And then Dawn Clay in the special education office was instrumental. I know Chris Apicios, the special education team coordinator, so it really was a group effort. I put together where it says SE, so SE means special education, so that's the area which it falls under. So we had 5 areas of partial non-compliance in special education, and I've listed here sort of each general criterion title and then the corrective action. We work collaboratively with the Department of Education to create the corrective action, which is really nice. The representative, our contact person from the department, was wonderful and really kind of supports us in creating corrective action that's going to be meaningful and kind of lasting for our district. So this area of finding talks about the fact that IEPs are required to be sent out to parents within 2 calendar weeks of a team meeting, and we are not consistently doing that. So we've already started kind of following through on all the corrective action. I won't read this word for word, but typically corrective action involves some kind of training component and then a tracking piece. So we've already done the training component of this with staff, and right now we're going to be moving into the tracking piece to kind of see where the gaps are. This area, on the IEP, there is a section called the non-participation justification, and it basically requires IEP teams to very specifically articulate if a student is not going to be in the general education setting, why that is, and for what parts of the day. It is, a part of the IEP that's about this big. So we are completing that portion of the IEP, but the Department of Education wants us to complete it more thoroughly. So again, similarly, we need to conduct training for special education staff, and then we're also going to be pulling some IEPs to make sure that later in the year to make sure that staff are now completing those more thoroughly than before. This is the third area. So there is a form, and it's called the N1. It's basically a notice that goes home with the IEP, and it's a form that needs to be filled out. There was one section of that form that's somewhat similar to the last criterion. There was one section of that form that, again, we were completing, but we were not completing in sufficient detail in the Department of Education's eyes. And certainly not to minimize these, but these are all really minor kind of technical areas of non-compliance that absolutely don't have any impact on sort of student success and whatnot. It's really sort of crossing the T's and dotting the I's. These are the last two areas. So again, in our handbooks, there was one missing component around students who have not yet been found eligible for special education services. In certain cases, are entitled to disciplinary protections, and that is just an easy add that we need to include into the handbooks. And then professional development, this is something that Angela and I are going to be working on. The department requires that that our professional development address diverse learning styles in the general education classroom. Basically, they would like us to do a little bit more PD with respect to the DCAP, really. So that's something that the three of us will be working on together. So now we're moving into the area of civil rights. So civil rights, we had two areas of partial compliance. One was bullying. So similar in sort of the theme of all of these areas. Again, our annual training was missing a very minor addition of language that we need to include, that school staff can be an aggressor in a bullying situation. So a small addition. It's required by law that we put that in there. And then for our Title IX and Section 504 coordinator, that's me, all of we had the correct publications, but the department wants us to include the name of the person, which is my name, in all of our publications so that people know exactly who to go to, which is, again, a relatively straightforward addition. And then these are two areas that, and I'm sorry, I was mistaken. We were cited in 4 areas for civil rights. I forgot about these 2. But these are 2 areas that the department has actually given a lot of resources on to districts because they were finding that almost every district has been cited in these 2 areas. So the first one is that the department requires that districts have a system and use a rubric, and you can see kind of the language right there, to review educational materials for all of those protected areas, to make sure that we're not using materials that depict certain individuals in a demeaning manner. And what was really neat, and I don't know if you want to speak to this, even before, so we found out that we were cited, and even before they came to meet with us about it, Angela had actually created a rubric, and they liked it so much that they sort of took it back and wanted to share it with other districts. So that was kind of cool. So we're actually kind of ahead of where we need to be for that. And so at this point, we need to train staff on the rubric. And then the last civil rights area is that we need to review every program in the district to ensure that all students in those areas have equal access to every program. So we need to formalize that. And then the last area, do you want to speak to this?
Can I ask you a quick question?
Oh, absolutely,
about that,
of course, yeah.
about the rubric?
Yep.
The state doesn't do that? They're going to let districts by district decide what's demeaning and lacking intellectual merit?
Correct. Yeah,
I'm okay with it. It just seems very against everything else the state and the federal government is doing. And with regards to a civil rights thing, you would think that they would want to be in charge of that.
And who knows, maybe that will be coming. They have promulgated so much guidance on this, really a lot of guidance, but they don't provide a rubric that we're required to use.
And by educational materials, does this include like ELA books?
Yeah.
Like novels?
Yes.
This criterion came about because the use of technology, a lot of teachers are bringing in, YouTube videos to really enhance the curriculum. individually. So there hasn't been, usually like through the textbooks, through district purchases,
Right, there's
you vet all
big
this.
progress.
But if I'm a teacher and I want to enhance, whatever I'm teaching in the classroom, and I bring in a video, how do you know it's not, it has stereotypes of bias in it? So this new criterion is to actually district-wide to make sure we're monitoring what teachers are bringing in the classroom individually. So that's kind of where that
That's good.
comes in.
Makes sense.
Right.
Thank you. Teachers, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Cole. If I could just go back to the CR 10B on the bullying.
Sure.
How did the surveyor or whoever stumble upon that?
We're required to provide them with lots of information, including the annual training.
Okay,
that-
so it's something they read
Exactly.
and they found missing.
Exactly.
Okay.
And this is the sort of thing, ultimately the goal of this is to help us become sort of a, not only more compliant, but, transparent and communicate, all of those pieces. So it's yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to explore just a little bit more the institutional self-evaluation piece, which it seems like that's kind of a big thing. If we're not doing a self-evaluation of policies or activities, with all the evaluations that we do, it's a little surprising, but that does seem kind of like a big thing, that they're saying we're not monitoring what we're doing in that particular area.
So if you look, and I can find the, we can look at the reported findings, but what they wanted to ensure more was that it was systematic and that it was calendared, because it had not reached, so the finding was a review of documents indicated that although the district obtains an assurance from each building principal stating that no student has been excluded from educational programming, on these bases, the district does not document its evaluation process.
Okay.
So again, and that's really what they're looking for. They're looking for it to become regular and systematic.
One of the things we've talked about this is the fact that we're doing the learning walks now collaboratively,
Right.
and that we will add equity walks to that process. So in other words, during our learning walks, we'll be looking for that in our classrooms. Another way to just gather data on a regular basis.
Do you want to jump to the ELE?
Sure. And this is an ongoing process. This is about having all of our teachers that are teaching English learners trained in the SEI endorsement, so the Sheltered English Immersion endorsement. And we have probably, I think we have 90 teachers at this time now SEI endorsed. But our challenge comes in at the high school every year because students take a variety of classes at the high school. So we try to get our core teachers, the majority of our core teachers are endorsed, but depending on where a student lands through scheduling, we still have some high school teachers that we need to get the endorsement for. So we continue to work on it. We offer the course in district once a year for convenience sake for our staff. And our staff take the responsibility seriously. So, but we track and we follow up with reminders. And it's a challenge when we're a low incidence district like this. But our L population is growing. So we have to just continue to endorse our teachers and give them proper training to be equipped to teach the students to the best of their ability in the classroom.
Is there any thought that just letting teachers know that they need to go do this?
Well, it's a challenge. That becomes a challenge just because it is a requirement for teachers to have SEI endorsement within a year of the time that they were assigned an English learner. But unless they were assigned an English learner during the cohort time where the state was providing the training for the teachers, it becomes a district responsibility to ensure that the teacher gets the endorsement. So when all of the regulations first rolled out, it appeared that the state was going to connect it to licensure. That's originally how it rolled out. And that would have made it really easy, because it just would have been part of the licensure process. All new teachers coming out of school, it is a requirement. But for our veteran staff, unless you were in that original cohort, it is not a licensure requirement until you are assigned an English learner. Once you're assigned an English learner, then you do have to receive the endorsement within a year of that time. So it's a hard thing to just say it's a requirement, that everybody has to do it. We encourage all of our teachers to do it. We certainly make it a requirement once they've been assigned an English learner. But until that time, it's a professional responsibility that we hope our teachers will follow through with, and for the most part, they have. But we're still playing a little bit of catch up with the veteran staff.
Is the training take place over a period of time? Is it a one-day workshop?
Oh, no, it's a full semester course.
Okay.
It's a 3-credit graduate course, and that's why we've been hosting it here in the district, to make it convenient for our teachers. So it's a 4-pay class, and we host it here, and the teachers pay tuition to take the course, but it's also a 3-credit course.
Any other questions? I think that was it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to jump down to the Newburyport High School data presentation now.
Okay, so first of all, thank you very much for having me here tonight. Just to kind of give an overview of the data that we've been working with, and just to kind of give an overview of kind of the process that we've taken on at the high school. So back in early October, when we had our first school council meeting, really the objective of that meeting was to solicit the council's feedback on just some focus areas for us to really start thinking about improvement planning, goals and objectives, which I've also included here in the presentation. But I do want to stress that the objectives that I put in there under the improvement benchmarks, those are drafts. So from the last meeting, the council gave me some just great feedback based off of just the information that I had compiled for them with the help of Mr. Testa, and just giving me some guidance. So those are still a work in progress. And I know there were some questions from the draft that was sent out on Friday, and I'll try to work to address those during the presentation, and if I don't, obviously feel free to jump in. So I'll give you an overview of what we have here. And I think to really kind of stress right off of the get-go, it's very safe to say that Newburyport High School is definitely a very strong performing school. And you can see here just from the achievement measures that were on last year's MCAS, and the state now, if you're not as aware, has kind of redefined its formulas in terms of how they give measures to schools. And so there's different language now in terms of the target benchmarks that they set for the school each year. And so you can see here in our all group category that we pretty much in the achievement measure exceeded our targets almost pretty much everywhere, with the exception of an ELA where we met target and the high needs met target, which is still, you know, something to be excited about. So definitely very clear that we have high achieving students. The other piece, when we looked at this over several years, just to really kind of get a pulse and a better sense of the story happening at Newburyport High School, and really paying close attention to how our all group compares with our high needs population. So with our low income students, students with a disability, and our English language learners, And so what we did here is we really kind of paid attention to what was happening with the gap. And with math and science, you can see that, even though the gap had been increasing this past school year, there was significant work that was done to decrease the gap between the high needs population subgroup and the all subgroup. And then in ELA, it's been pretty flat. But again, the achievement levels of the students are very high. But then, with the growth measure that the state provides, it was a little bit of a different story. So you can see here that in ELA, for our lowest performing students, which is a number of 36, and then our high needs, that we were below the target that the state had set for us. And then the same thing with the lowest performing for the math, including our all population as well. And so that just kind of when we went over this data, so what we decided to do was just try to go a little bit deeper and see how we may compare to other schools that are similar to us with high achievement rates, just to see because sometimes what happens with the growth percentile is high achieving schools, they just don't grow that much because they're already high achieving. And so what we did is we, using the DART analysis tool that the state provides, you can actually go in and try to find comparable schools. And at a conference that we had attended back in late September, which was on MyCap, really trying to explore college and career readiness in schools in terms of programming. So they had recommended 2 comparison schools for us to use when we're just looking at our school data, and that was Linfield and Winchester. Winchester being a larger school than us, and Linfield being slightly smaller. And what was interesting here, so when I used the DART analysis tool in comparing our growth percentile with Linfield and Winchester, you can see that we definitely we were a little bit less performing in terms of growth. So meaning that our kids, when they were in 8th grade taking the MCAS assessment, so whatever their achievement measure was, they are then lumped in with all of the other kids across the state, or in this case with Linfield and Winchester, who also scored the same score. And so then when they take the test in grade 10, you keep that cohort together and see where it may vary. And that's what gives you your growth percentile ranking. And so you can see that we were just at 50 percentile for the ELA growth and under 50 percentile for the math, whereas your goal is always to be above 50th percentile. So it just meant that was a place for us to kind of focus some of our benchmarks around. It doesn't mean that the sky is falling or anything like that, but it just means that there's some things that we can tighten up in the classroom to really make sure we're meeting the needs of all kids. So another set of data that we took a look at, and again across multiple years, was our advanced placement data as well. And so here we just I shared with them just our trending data just in terms of number of kids that were also participating in advanced placement. And so what was interesting here was that even though the percentage of students receiving qualifying scores has been trending downward, and I kind of put this here in the summary, what's interesting is when you look at the chart on the right about the participation, you can see we have more kids that are participating. And typically in schools, because there has been just a large push, was a big push for us in Salem, was trying to get more kids exposed to advanced placement courses, because when you are exposed to a college level class in high school, you have that much better of a chance of meeting success and enduring through college when you graduate from high school. Now, the other interesting thing here that the team, being the council, observed was that the number of tests taken as compared to the increase in terms of the number of students, that individual students that were taking an advanced placement class, that was increasing. So really kind of indicating to us that we do have more students that are starting to take multiple advanced placement classes in one year. And so and actually this was a great question posed by one of the council members. Well, why is that the case? Is there things that we can explore in our program that maybe might make things more flexible so that kids are spreading out, taking advanced placement classes, rather taking that in 1 year, 3 or 4 of them, just to get them on their transcript. And so that's just one of the areas that we'd be exploring, and I kind of went over that as well in the part of our objectives.
Can I ask a quick question?
Definitely.
On the last slide with the scores, the decrease, are the, how do I say this? People worry oftentimes when more kids are allowed into AP classes that it's going to water down the level of instruction. And so therefore they would take going from 85% to 61%, meaning that the whole class did more poorly, as opposed to our high flyers, our top students are still scoring well. It's just we brought in some students for whom AP is going to be a bit of a reach because we want them to reach. And so it's not that we're not negatively affecting, the worry about opening up AP courses is always that we're negatively affecting certain kids. And I'm just wondering if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. And part of how I try to map out my day is to be in the classrooms as much as I can, at least 40 to 50% of the day. And having had the opportunity to get into advanced placement classes at the high school, I feel like I can safely say the rigor of the classes has not changed. I do think, and I get into this a little bit with our objectives, that we can do some work just in terms of how we differentiate instruction in the classroom and really using during class data to intervene and provide kind of on-the-spot feedback for students to support all kids better in the classroom. But definitely I think where our staff is at the high school is they're teaching at the highest level of rigor and really working to engage all students around that, which has been a nice thing to see. But I definitely hear what you're saying in terms of sometimes the thinking is that now we cannot go at the pace that we would like, or I can't get to the level of a topic that I would typically get to.
And I'm also concerned with, teaching kids how to do AP work. Like if we don't create an upward trajectory in course offerings, I don't want to throw kids into the deep end either and say, sorry, you're either keeping up with the class or you're out. So.
Yeah, and I think that's why the state actually, and it's a great new measure that they put into the whole accountability system in terms of measuring percentage of students that are taking advanced coursework in their junior and senior year. So it really kind of puts the pressure back on schools. How are you making upper level work more accessible for all kids? And so that's some of the thinking that we need to do down the street over there at the high school in terms of thinking about, how are we creating kind of pathways and avenues, and kids can visually see, if I take this course, this then sets me up for this one, but then what are the skills that we're really getting at in the lower level courses, freshman and sophomore year?
Yeah. So what does all exactly include? Is that a national number?
Correct.
Okay.
I think it's actually the whole world in terms of kids taking an
I just wanted to
class.
make sure I understood that. All right, thank you.
All right, this is the slide in terms of our advanced coursework here. So you can see that with all of our students, this kind of goes back to what you were saying, David, that with all of our students, we met our target for percentage of kids the state had set for taking advanced coursework in their junior and senior years. But you can see with the high needs that we did not earn any points here. So meaning that we were significantly below the target that the state had set for us. And so that was clear that that's a place that we definitely need to focus on in terms of our programming, but then how we're really supporting students to feel ready and to be ready when they're taking advanced level courses.
Is there a way, and maybe Angela, this is a better question to you than Andy, but to sort of backtrack that data? Like we would say that graduation data should be looked at in third graders. I would imagine that academic achievement data to talk to the NOC and see, like, what do we know as early predictors, early interventions? Because you guys can't be responsible for
No, I understand.
everything.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good point, David, and I think what we're seeing in this data at the high school isn't a surprise, because we are seeing the data right through our district, that we have a population of our high-need students that are just, they're not achieving at the same rate, and they're not growing at the same rate. And so we're doing deeper dives into our practices and to say, how are we differentiating? How are we encouraging that population to stimulate the growth that they're making in school? So I think we are doing that. We're working backwards in that to see, because I think we can follow this cohort right through the district. And I think we have pockets of success on certain years, but we haven't been able to systematically maintain that level of growth that we'd like to for this particular population.
It would actually be helpful to me if you would just spend a moment and define high needs, because everybody in the room could have a different understanding of what they think high needs is. Can you define what that means?
Sure, I'd be happy to. The high needs group is our special ed population, our ELL population, and our economically disadvantaged, all combined.
Okay, thank you.
Last question. This a number of kids who took an advanced course?
The percentage, right.
The percentage. So is that, by advanced, is that like honors and AP, or just AP? Like, what do we call advanced coursework?
Actually, I brought there's an extensive list that the Department of Education has.
Oh.
And we can forward that to you.
That the state decides.
Yes, correct. The state does decide.
Okay.
But advanced placement is a big piece of that, but then also some of our upper level math classes, doesn't have to be AP. So like taking statistics or calculus.
And then are these courses at Newburyport that the kids qualify for, or is these things they choose to take? I guess I'm trying to figure out if because that's a pretty big drop. That's almost 10%. So do we have a group of kids who just don't believe in themselves, or a group of kids who didn't qualify for the course?
I think it's a little bit of both, because the upper level courses do have requisites.
I guess that was my question.
In terms of courses, and that's kind of spawned our look. And you'll see just in the benchmarks, in terms of the school improvement planning, that we do need to take a look at just how our program is set up, and in terms of where are there opportunities for greater flexibility.
Great,
in terms of kids really charting their way and really taking their interests, more so about their interests, to really define the sequence of courses that they take in the different academic areas.
I just wanted to add that, when we get to this level 2 at the high school, when we start to collect this kind of data, number one, this is a new piece of data that the state has started to assist us in collecting, which is great. But the other thing is, it's not the same cohort from year to year. When we're looking at the students in earlier grades, we can follow the trend of a particular cohort. So sometimes when we see a change, it's the dynamic of the cohort,
Well, that's
usually
what I was trying to
not
figure out,
the
like,
only
whether or not
thing,
these kids
but-
are as ambitious as last year's high needs
Right.
kids. I don't really know.
Right, yeah.
Can't really compare cohorts.
It's apples
Right.
and oranges, yeah.
And just, again, I see numbers here. When you see a 10% drop, are we talking about 30 kids being affected, or are we talking about 4 kids who have, in that cohort?
Andy, what was the size of this cohort, 180?
So for the high needs, it was 26.
Okay,
26.
3 kids.
so 20%
Okay,
of that.
that's helpful.
Oh, wait, I apologize. I was looking at, actually, if you see the N column, so in the high needs here, that's right, because this is combining the data I just showed was one grade level, but this combines both grade levels. So 64 students
So the total number is 60, the total population is 64 students.
And 20% of the 64.
Okay, got it.
And so one of the things that schools will look at, though, a lot, recognizing that you are dealing with different cohorts. So first of all is also trying to kind of look at the full story over multiple years. Then the other piece is also looking at the gap in terms of your all students versus your subgroups as well. Because that's a place that you are trying to reduce. Okay, any other questions on this? Okay, so this is, one of the activities that we then led at the school council meeting, so where we had all of this data, and so pretty much what I did was I allowed the council just to engage in a discussion, and I just tried to take as many notes as I could, just in terms of collecting their thinking. I know Zach was part of the council there. It's great. We have 5 students who are part of the school council, 3 parents and 3 teachers, so it's a great group, and then Mike Testa assists me as well. So it was great to just kind of, as they went back and forth, and also keep hearing the kids' feedback in terms of giving guidance on places for us to explore. And so one of the pieces, which we had actually started even before we had that school council meeting, just realizing that we needed to really engage teachers around our MCAS results, was making sure that the teachers' learning goals were really tied to standards, performance standards for kids, and then being able to map out their action plans accordingly. The other place that we're trying to do more work around, but realize that this needs to be fleshed out a little bit more just because of certain structures that are in place at the high school, is really trying to help teachers work collaboratively. And so one of the steps that we have started to take this year is around allowing them to use a lot of our staff meeting time as common planning time. So where they're organized in curriculum teams so that within courses they can create common assessments outside of their midterm and final exams. But then at the same time, using that time to then calibrate how they're scoring the assessments to help them gain a deeper understanding of the standards that are being assessed. But then the big piece, using performance data throughout the year to really work collaboratively on how they're intervening and supporting kids in the classroom. That's been a big piece of it. And then us administratively really focusing our feedback on what information, what student learning information are you collecting during the class, and then what are you doing with it? So how are you then really working with kids the next time you see them? If you realize they missed a concept in one class, a group of kids, how are you supporting them so they're just not falling further behind? So that's kind of the work that's really hopeful. I'm hopeful will really support our how students grow in their learning, so that hopefully the next time when I'm pulling this data between us and comparable schools, that our growth percentile, even though our kids are still high achieving, our growth percentile is either where they're at, if not better, is the ultimate goal. And getting teachers very comfortable with using during class, like just quick formative assessments so they can figure out how to intervene with kids and give kids feedback right on the spot, is just a powerful way to impact learning and keep all kids moving forward. And then this also led us, there was a discussion, just what are the tools that we currently have for when students, after in-class interventions are happening, are still having a hard time keeping up. And so really so right now we're exploring what are the different intervention tools that we currently have at the high school, but where might we need to really think about, working collaboratively with the district in terms of thinking about what might be something we may need to bring in to really help kids in our academic support classrooms use some of their time for academic intervention purposes on some skills, which is what some of the data, when you get into the growth, some kids, come in a little bit behind grade level, and what do we do to really get them caught up? And then the other piece, which is really around the question that was asked, how do we really make the advanced coursework more accessible? And that's really what I was talking about earlier, just around our program of studies. So really taking a look at that. Is there opportunities for greater flexibility in course selection? And then one of the steps, since that school council meeting that we've decided to take is really just creating more of a visual for kids. So they can see how a course I take as a freshman sets me up to then take a course sophomore year, but then really kind of backwards planning. Like, where are my interests? And if I want to take this elective in aquaponics, what are the courses I should be taking my freshman, sophomore years, so that can be accessible for me. So it really is more driven by student interest, in addition to how they're performing in the classroom. And then the other part that we can start taking a look at is just dual enrollment opportunities, because that is another option that the state has in terms of, advanced coursework. So where kids are able to take a college class concurrently while being enrolled in high school, and if they pass the class, they receive college credit and they receive high school credit. Before leaving Salem High School, I was very much involved in a grant that we received for early college. And we were just fortunate because Salem State University is right there. And so that program is going on this year with kids taking the college classes right at the high school campus. So definitely some neat things that can happen there if we're able to foster those partnerships with local schools. Okay, so here we have our graduation rate. And so here, where the state kind of defined us as not meeting our targets, well, I mean, we didn't meet our targets. But then when we kind of looked at our 5-year graduation rate, I mean, what was very clear is that even though some kids, and again, this cohort is very small, we're talking 7 students, but we're not losing students, so it's very clear that they're staying in there and continuing with their studies to make their graduation requirements. I've been able to sit in on the meetings that Mr. Testa runs with all of the counselors at the school, just really looking at how students are performing at the end of every quarter and what interventions can happen in terms of possible credit recovery, and really trying to get students to that graduation marker. Chronic absenteeism, this is now one of the next measures, one of the new measures as well that the state, yes?
Can we go back to that
Sure.
previous slide just for a second? So I've been looking at your N. So you have 2 years up there, correct?
Yes.
So is the N the same for both years, and how can that be?
So yeah, this is where it gets confusing, and that's why I did the arrows with the circles.
Yeah.
So if you look at the 96.1 for all students.
Yeah.
So actually, that's a very good question.
I'm going to hit you with some
The N changes to 178.
I'm going to hit you with some N on the absenteeism too. So.
Okay, no worries.
Yeah,
but what I can tell you is that our kids are staying in the school. But that's a very good question, why the N.
Yeah, because it's really difficult when you drill down in these tables. I would expect a separate N for each one of those, and you should be able to calculate the change almost, and you can't if the N's. I mean, the N's. I believe the N's will be different for those classes. So I mean that can be something, but overall, like you say, the theme is your numbers are going down, which is good.
Right. Correct. But that's a good question. But it is, so when you follow the 96.1 to the 98.9, that's the same, should be the same group of kids.
But it is a different cohort. No?
No, that should be the same one.
Same cohort.
So he's just showing the trend for the 2 years for those two.
So 216 is effectively their junior year? Or no?
So in 2016,
Yeah.
so 96.1% of the students graduated
Gotcha.
in 4 years.
Right.
So majority of the kids.
Yeah.
So in 2000.
Okay. And an additional 2.8%
Right.
completed it, but it took them 5 years.
Yes.
Okay, got it. All right, thank you.
Yeah, it does get a little confusing, just in terms of even how the state presents it. But that's where, using the target pieces makes it a little bit more manageable, at least for me. Okay, so then in the chronic absenteeism, so with our all students, obviously, we have our, in 2017, so we did have, we've been improving here. So from the 10.2 to 9.9, so the state did label us as improved below target. But the area that we kind of picked on as the biggest area of concern, again, was with our high needs population. So from 2017 to 2018, you know, jumping up by 1.8%, but really that it's just been a very high percentage of kids. And so that's where we've really started to kind of just look at some school practices in terms of how we better progress monitor and then intervene with student attendance. And actually, Tricia Blackstock, who wasn't able to be here tonight, so she's been doing some work with the guidance staff, just in terms of their student learning goals, really be focused on student attendance in terms of really trying to get that number smaller.
Are there specific trends here or issues that you're identifying in terms of this high level of absenteeism?
Yeah, and actually I can let Mike, are you comfortable answering that?
I think it is concerning. I mean,
It's very concerning.
because we're talking chronic absenteeism
Right.
as that number of days out of school and the impact that it has on learning as well. For a population that in some cases is struggling to begin with, which just compounds the problem.
So are there, are you finding certain trends or things that are of concern? I mean,
No real trends, just really trying to seek more interventions and be more proactive as a school to at least discuss it and, you know, have with the guidance staff and myself and as a whole school focus on this as one of our areas to improve on.
And I think one of the overall trends would be a lot of school anxiety. There's also been some hospitalizations of students that play into that, and that's one of the pieces with Christina that we're working with is just looking at some of our, I guess, support programs, for lack of a better term, in terms of how do we better support students that when they are hospitalized for social emotional reasons and then are missing school for 2 or 3 weeks, how are we supporting that transition back? Yes.
So they're counting excused absences into a chronic absenteeism?
Yes.
Even like hospitalizations?
Yep.
Yes.
Interesting. And so are they allowing like flipped or blended learning models to circumvent?
So there are a lot of different ways that school report attendance, just in terms of certain things. So for example, we are able to, and this might also be some of our data practices or reporting things that we need to fix as well. So if a student is out and they are receiving academic tutoring, then you can count them as, and let's say it's a medical reason, you can mark them present or absent medical, no, excuse me, you can mark them present medical reason. So that it's not impacting your attendance rate. But this district has to be providing them with the tutoring. That's the big piece.
I think sometimes, just to add to this, it definitely is a reflection of the symptoms of some of the social emotional struggles of our students. And sometimes it takes some time before we can find programming that they're going to be able to handle during a difficult time in their lives. So, you know, there may be a period of chronic absenteeism where we're just trying to get them back to school. And then we realize the problem may be beyond that. And some of these families decide to homeschool temporarily or do some virtual schooling for a while. But meanwhile, we're gathering all this, you know, this time is passing where the students have been chronically absent. So that's one of the things we really need to look at is how can we expedite this process? Our main objective is always to try to keep them in school and to keep them integrated whenever possible. So, but that takes time often, and they're frequently absent during that time. So that's a component of this too. And where they're counting all absenteeism, you know, into this data. Pardon me?
Suspensions as well?
I don't believe so.
You know, that's a good question, David. I'm not sure about that. Because when I read the information on the accountability data, because this was one of the new categories of the accountability data, really what they're looking at is face time with the teacher.
Right.
So whenever a student is not there for face time with the teacher, it's considered an absence. But I don't know about suspensions. That's a good question.
We can find that.
It wouldn't be too relevant to our data because those numbers are very low. But statewide, that's a good point.
Hi. So again, you got just one end out there for starters. But my other question, if you're really looking for integrity of the data, for what you're trying to do here, wouldn't it be wise to throw out, if you will, attendance for the days you have early releases, and as well as attendance for days before holidays, because sometimes people pull their kids out of school, and to kind of piggyback on what Mr. Hawkeiser said, if you've got some high-need students who have maybe some medical things that they need to take care of or appointments, I would, again, look for taking out the excused absences too. Because I think if you don't, and I think we've talked in these committee meetings about how on some of the early release days, there's been a lot of absence. So I would just say if you're really looking for the integrity of the data, you should kind of throw out those days, and that way you might, I'm not saying this isn't, this is useful, but I think it'd be interesting to drill down a little bit and see how much it changes, and also take a look at the fact, and I did some math in advance of this, take a look at the fact of the attendance difference between, if you will, non-high needs and high needs, along with the all students numbers, because I think you're going to find that the non-high needs attendance rate is about, or absentee rate, I should say, is ranges from those numbers up there between 5.1 and 5.9%.
Correct, and I would totally agree with you on that. I think the unfortunate thing with the attendance data is it's the state that collects this.
Yes.
So we can't control,
right,
what there are early releases and all of that.
But for your own work, what you're trying to do for Newburyport High School, I would think that you want the data that has the most integrity and most meaning to you, as opposed to, well, this is how the state's counting it, so. But I think for your own internal studies, because I think it's important, we've talked about it in this committee before, are kids coming to school on early release days? And that's been a concern, as well as how, chopping up the weeks, with the early release days and early dismissals and things like that.
No, that makes total sense. And just to share with you some of the conversation that had happened at the school council meeting, and I think, in terms of the early, because that was talked about in terms of just the early release time, the reality is a lot of kids that their families may not have them there at an early release day or take the longer weekend. They're not the kids that are having 18 or more absences in the school year. So that part was definitely recognized by the council. And so really, the whole idea of data is it's really trying to get you, where do you want to focus? And it's definitely clear with one of our subgroups that's a place that we need to focus on. We just had a meeting the other day with the director of the Hopewell House. So looking at some of our students from different areas, and what we're trying to problem solve around is how do we make sure that Newburyport High School is a welcoming place for all kids? Realizing that, our diversity is not as great, but when we have students that are transferring in from other districts or, just maybe they don't have the same things that other kids have, it can sometimes make kids not feel as comfortable. And so that's our question, is how do we make sure that we really know each kid very well, but then also at the same time is that their parents or their guardians also feel like we're in partnership with them as well. And so that's an area that I think we can do some work around as we're learning more about the community and different areas of the community that I think we need to be more kind of a part of, and they feel that we're a part and working with them as well. And so that would be that was probably our biggest takeaway from this data. But Steve, I definitely agree with you that, looking at the data in terms of what is useful makes the most sense, because I totally get it, in terms, because the state is just pulling right from our student information system and then spitting it back out, and then also understanding that cohorts of kids are different, but it definitely starts to tell a story in terms of focusing some attention.
Yeah, and this would just be sort of a general comment. One of the, if there are any advantages to longevity, it's you can get a sense of what's going on. And it seems to me that there has been some, early on in the 18 years that I've been here, there was some pretty dramatic improvements in working with high needs population. A lot of that was identified because of the Learning Enrichment Center was providing this really terrific intervention. The graduation rates went up with those kids, and that was really good. But every year we're saying, we're having something going on here with high needs kids, and I wonder if now isn't the time to sit down and have a real comprehensive conversation about how high needs kids' needs are or are not being met. I worry that because we approach it fresh every year, we're kind of doing it piecemeal, when in fact we need to have a very comprehensive, in-depth conversation about what's happening with these kids and what can we do about that, as opposed to sort of responding on a year-by-year basis. It just seems like it's time to do that. It's overdue, probably.
If I could speak to that, Bruce, we started this work, this is 2 years ago now. If you remember, we came and we talked about the fact that we were doing a root cause analysis around our economically disadvantaged population, because that is the subgroup that's within this group that our data is the most flat with, that we make the least progress with. And I think we have put many pieces in place. I don't feel like we start over every year. We certainly don't have the problem solved yet, but I do feel like for that population, we have been working very hard over the last 2 years into our third year in trying to address the needs of this population. I think one of our challenges, too, that we face is Newburyport's changing. And our school population is changing, and we, I think some of our programming needs to change with it, and we're playing catch up in that area. I agree with you, because although when you compare us to more urban centers or even larger districts, our diversity is much less. However, when you look at the diversity of learners that we have here, it's significant. And so I think we are. I mean,
I didn't want to, I'm sorry if I've given anybody the impression that I think that literally we're starting over each year.
Yeah.
It just seemed, I've heard so many years in so many different ways that we're really, this is a real challenge that these students are having and that we need to meet. And it just, I haven't seen that. I haven't seen, for example, I do remember the root cause analysis, but it's never been reported back out to us what that was. What did we learn? Because it seems to me that if we learned something, it would have some bearing on some of this stuff, and it would be good for us to know about that. So that would be one thing. And the other thing is that to what extent are we in conversation with other districts that are working with these populations? What's working? What's working in Winchester? What's working in Chelsea? What are we having those conversations? Because again, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. If there are strategies that are working, we don't have to figure out what they are. Sometimes we just have to identify them.
Right.
And that is what's nice about that comparable data that the state provides, is that you can really look for schools that show tremendous success. And actually Winchester, especially in the post-secondary education, especially for their high needs population, seems to do very well. I didn't include those slides in here, but from what we saw when we were looking at it at our school council meeting, they seem to have, their high needs students seem to have a lot of success. So that would be a place for us to take a look at.
Really, I would just really encourage that. And I would love to hear what are the challenges that the district's facing in meeting those kids' needs.
I'd also have to assume that we know these kids, like personally, we can just sit them down one day and talk to them, interview the families. Like, that doesn't seem to be that many overall, right?
Oh, I would agree. That's where I feel a lot more.
So I'm just curious if like that work has started either 2 years ago, or because they'd still be in the district unless they were upper high school, so they'd still be here. Like, have we been talking to them? Have we been figuring out, and what exactly do you need? Not you, the subgroup, but you, the family.
Yeah, and I think just with the student support team meetings that Mike and Tricia run with the counselors, that is definitely a focus. But definitely now with a greater lens on attendance. But and the problem with attendance is that if you don't intervene quick enough, you're not going to change the pattern. So it really is about putting practices into place. And one thing, not to talk for you, Mike, but one of the things that he is doing differently this year is having that as that's one of the action items at every student support meeting, which is every 2 weeks. So they're looking at student attendance trends so that the counselors can then either pull in the student and have conversations, or meet with the families and really try to better understanding function of behavior. And we've had several situations already this year where, where the counselors have helped students. Sometimes it is, it might result in a hospitalization, but it's what the student needs at that point in time. And rather than things happening further down the road because attendance wasn't necessarily being monitored as well, is being taken care of earlier.
And this is going on K-12. So these conversations are happening at all of our schools, and hopefully we will have a district approach to this sort of.
One of the things that we've really been working on that Andy mentioned earlier is building the relationships with the families, because oftentimes in these situations there's a breakdown with the family and the school, or there's been a negative experience with the school from the parents or with a school, and so there isn't a lot of trust between the formalized education system and the family for a variety of reasons. And so actually that's at the heart of the work that we were doing around the farmers market, was really this outreach to the community to say we're all in this together, and that our approach is really around good nutrition and how we're taking care of ourselves. So, but it's really about building that community partnership, hopefully with some of our families that need that the most and need to feel like they can trust the schools as a safe place and a place that they can turn to for help, rather than a place to avoid because they might be breaking the rules, or because the child's missed too much school, or for a variety of reasons. So it is multi-layered. It's like an onion. You peel back one layer and you reveal the next thing that needs to happen. So I think that's one component of it. It's not the only component, but.
Okay. And so the past year, so the state now also has school climate surveys that they distribute to the schools. And I believe Newburyport last year conducted this with the grade 10 students. I know some school systems, they just do it with all kids.
We did everybody.
You did do everybody. Okay. But I think in this number here, we had the total responses of 172.
Was it 5, 8, and 10?
Yeah.
5, 8, and 10.
They do it
5, 8, and 10.
MCAS.
Yeah.
Testing.
This is the MCAS survey?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Well, it's administered at that
At the end of the test.
Right.
Yes.
We tried to figure out a lot about that last year. Okay, great.
And so you can see here, Newburyport pretty much falls in the middle. And actually with the student engagement piece almost getting to the point of being very strong in that category, where it had its score of a 49. And the one place that, at least for this presentation, where I just kind of elected to go a little bit deeper, I did not have this data available for when I had met with the school council back in early October, but we'll go over it at our December meeting, was just the environment, because that was the one place that we were slightly behind the state. And so then what I did was I just looked at the descriptors in the survey where we were, more greater than 5 points behind the state, and these were the questions or the descriptors that the kids were responding to where we had the greatest amount behind the state. And then the highlight here was that, we were over 5 points ahead of the state just in when, students seeking help from each other when they're struggling to learn, which I think says a lot about our kids.
I think it would be really interesting to give this same survey not after sitting for MCAS.
I think
I'm
you're
learning in
right,
school are
right.
relevant and important to me, 42%.
Yeah,
I think that'd be a little higher if it was at a different time.
Have we ever done like a panorama survey or any of those other companies that do these sort of things?
Yes, we did one it was at the high school, but it's been many years now, like at least 5 years ago now. But I think that's a great point on it, even to think about the same survey after a place-based learning experience or something like that, what the response would be.
Because they had to finish it, right, to finish the
Close
test,
out
right?
the test, yeah.
Yeah.
Like 25% voice in deciding school rules as I'm sitting here taking this mandated test.
Right, right.
Well, but I also, I can see, at the beginning of the school year, we had a change that would impact this particular criteria, because we did develop a set of school rules with feedback from the school. And so I see that, that there's really movement, and what I'm seeing overall that is encouraging to me is that in the way we've talked about these things that we're looking at, it seems to me that we're coming up with strategies that sort of increase our own accountability for doing stuff. And that's a shift, a significant shift. Years ago, it used to be, well, those are the kids. It's just those kids. It's them. And really kind of shifting the focus to, we have an obligation, we have a responsibility. What are we doing to engage these kids? What are we doing to support these kids? It's the evolution we're challenged by, with health and wellness, social and emotional learning. We're now sort of dealing with stuff that for a lot of years it was sort of, that's just who the kid is. It doesn't work anymore. So I'm very encouraged by that.
And these opportunities are obviously in terms of our accountability, but I think just in terms of some of the things that we're putting into place so that we're aware during the school year. So just like we're asking teachers to use formative assessments during their classroom so they can intervene with kids, as a school, we have a responsibility to create our own kind of dipsticks, for lack of a better term, to really get a pulse for how we're doing in regards to school culture. So one of the pieces we'll do is try to create kind of a similar type of survey just so we can gauge where our students are at in terms of feeling about the overall school climate, and then be able to intervene or adjust things. That's really what it's all about, is how do we adjust based off of the information that we're collecting. And this is kind of our benchmarks. So every year, and if you want us to come back with whatever formative data we're collecting during the school year to kind of monitor what we're doing, I'm totally open to that. And so one of the other interesting pieces of data, the state is it's getting pretty impressive with the amount of data that they're able to kind of track. And so this came from the MyCap conference that we had participated, as we're really starting to look at how do we strengthen our ability to support kids in thinking about life after high school. And so now what the state has been able to collect through National Clearinghouse data, I guess, or what I had learned, was that all colleges report out information about their students, and because our students have their SACID number tied to them, which is then connects them back to Newburyport High School, we can actually get information about how our kids how they perform in college in terms of staying in college and getting a degree. So we had our same comparison schools here, and so this is actually about the kids who graduated back in 2009. And so you can see here, so you start off with 100% of the students, because those are all the kids that had graduated back in 2009. And so you can see with our kids, so 75% of the graduates of 2009 enrolled in college right after high school, and then persistently enrolled in college. That means that after 2 years, they were still enrolled in their program or university, and then obtained a degree within 6 years. And so that kind of shows the progression in terms of what happens. And then we're able to kind of compare our progress based off of some comparable schools. But then you can even go deeper with this data, where you can even track it with students with disabilities or your high needs population, so you can really go far with it. Yes.
Is 2009 sort of an exemplar, or is that the last year they've got this data available for?
So that's when they started.
Okay.
So that's when they started tracking this, and then it took 6 years. So that's the window that they provide, so if kids take a gap year or whatever else, so that they can sufficiently track.
But it also was the start of a very significant recession. And I wonder how much finance had to do with some of these students having to leave. You know, I'm not so sure that's the best year to have started this.
Well, wasn't this Common Core 2009?
I think it was around that time.
Yeah, so I think they really started paying attention to college readiness based on K-12 programming, which is why they would have done this. And yes, so I had a professor at USM in Maine who was researching this, and the two things she found was, number one, cost. People were they just couldn't keep up. And number two was they were just being blown away by the academic expectations of college. They had never seen anything like it, so they were just intimidated out of the classroom.
Well, the community college system has been looking at this kind of data for years.
Right.
You know, in terms of understanding that so many of the students who come in are taking developmental courses because they're not ready to step into college level courses.
We have some of that data somewhere too. I know I've reviewed that with Trish. How many of our students need to take remedial classes going into college?
Wasn't there a test?
Yes.
The acuplacer.
The acuplacer that
And we started, are we still taking that?
For all of our kids, or?
Our, like, juniors or seniors, we would send juniors, we
We
were
haven't
sending.
done that broadly in a number of years.
Because we would take them to Essex and take the test.
Now, there is a data, you can actually, from the DART, you can pull out that information, how many of the kids start off in remedial courses in college, and for us, it was definitely low. So a lot of our kids are going in, at least not needing to take some of those entry-level classes to be ready for the college-level work. That was, I remember one of the teachers who had come with us to the conference, he had pulled that out of that data, and I remember making a note about that.
It'd be interesting if they showed up prepared and still aren't graduating in 6 years.
Right.
That
would be really interesting.
That's tough.
Yeah.
I don't know if we can claim the economic.
Yeah, I don't know. And I think, because I also want to say at the council meeting, one of the parents was mentioning, and I wasn't aware of this, just the national average is pretty low to begin with as well. I think it's below 50%.
In urban, I think it's below 30%.
Yeah,
So it's hellacious.
So and I think there's a lot that goes into it. I definitely don't have all the answers, but I know we have baseline data that we're able to really start using. And then just for us to question, what might we be able to do differently at the high school so kids are feeling more equipped? Because that really is our vision. We went over this just the other day with the staff.
Enrollment.
Is that we want, I mean, the more exposure kids have to collegiate classes, the better off they're gonna fare when they start going to college. But the objective is that we want every kid feeling ready for whatever challenge comes their way when they're walking the stage. 100% of our kids. That's what's gonna drive us. And so here was just some other data that, just for the purpose of the presentation, just to get a pulse on, just in terms of the number of kids who are enrolling in a post-secondary degree program right after high school. Because obviously you have, the more kids that are enrolling right after high school, you have a better chance that you're gonna have a higher percentage of kids that are finishing. But you can see here that we are definitely not significantly behind, with the exception of our high needs population compared to Newbury, compared to Linfield and Winchester. But it's definitely something that we want to be focusing on. What are some structural changes we can make at the high school so that kids have a better plan for themselves when they're leaving and feeling more equipped to endure college?
Are you
Pretty
seeing more
consistent,
students
too.
opting to take a gap year and you go do, AmeriCorps, or, I mean, I've just been hearing more of students doing
Yeah.
that. Are we seeing a trend in that, or is it just?
I know that coming here, I've heard that a lot more than I did in Salem, of kids just opting to take a gap year, whether it's to travel or to work and kind of figure things out. So that is definitely, and I think that's also a big reason why the state looks at it over a six-year
Do you have friends doing that?
time frame.
Do you have friends doing that?
I do, yes.
A lot of them?
Like, I can name like 2 or 3 kids off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Anecdotal, but.
I mean, I would expect a slight decrease because of that. I know that kids weren't taking gap years, and then the year that my daughter graduated, she took a gap year, and probably half a dozen other kids took a gap year and then went on to school. So I would think that number is just increasing. And part of it is that kids want to have the experience, and another part of it is they don't want to go into debt immediately after graduating high school.
If they don't know what they want to do.
Right.
And so by doing a gap year, they could potentially.
Yeah, figure that out.
Yeah.
I would agree. Yeah. And so that actually kind of led us to, just in terms of really thinking through, what are just some actions that we can start taking as a school, and making sure that our teachers are all on the same page with the direction that we want to start going with. So just in terms of really better understanding, the demands of the 21st century and what kids are really going to be walking into, recognizing, going right back to the video that Sean shared with the whole entire district, just around, 10 years from now, who knows what jobs will be available and kind of what are there going to be the different demands on society. So for us to just engage in a process collectively involving parents and involving kids and involving our teachers, just in terms of constructing a vision of the high school graduate from Newburyport high schools. What do we want to make sure that all kids, when they're graduating, that they are equipped with? But then whatever that is, that the school then has the structures in place to support kids and to monitor kids meeting those skills. That's really the big thing. So it's one thing to have a vision of what we want all kids to achieve upon graduation, but then the question is, do we actually have the tools so that those things are transparent? They're transparent to the kids, they're transparent to the families, that these are the skills that we're trying to get across in this particular level course, and then you move on to the next level course, and this is the next level of skill. And that kids are also equipped to actually be able to monitor themselves as well, whether it's through a portfolio system or through our advisory system, so they're constantly reflecting on their own growth, not just academically, but on these skills that really equip them to manage the complexities of the world, which can be a big piece in terms of, why some students, aren't able to get that degree after 6 years, because things become a lot more complicated as you get older. And if you struggle to really kind of manage and adapt to situations, that's a big piece that can kind of deter you from any plan. And so that's kind of a big piece of this, is we want, and this was actually a bulk of the conversation at the council meeting, and I felt back, we definitely went way over that night on the time that we had thought. But it was a great conversation they were having just around, the idea of kids developing a plan for themselves as they go through their 4 years of high school, but making sure that that plan is flexible, right? So that you're really kind of coaching kids on what it means to adapt and adjust, but still kind of having a vision for yourself and the work that we're starting to do to really better frame our advisory program. So I'm really doing work freshman year where the advisors are working with kids to help them better understand themselves. You know, what are their strengths? What are their areas for growth? And then sophomore year, we had a great meeting today over at Anna Jake's just in terms of, you know, working on how do we help kids to then take what their interests are and knowing who they are. You know, what are some possible careers that maybe they want to explore? And then really being able to go deep through the advisory program and understanding what these careers are, but then what are the steps that you need to take in order to make it to those careers? And then really leading up to their junior and senior year in terms of really starting to chart, all right, where are the possibilities?
Do we have a career fair here? Like professionals from Newburyport come into the schools, talk to the kids, this is what I do, this is how I get there. Do we do something like that?
Yes, actually, that was the meeting at Anna Jake's today, was about really planning for that. And making sure that every kid.
Is at the high school,
Yep.
yeah.
And is the structure of that these groups come in and they sit at tables and kids come by and talk with them, or do they make appointments to talk to these people?
So we are, in the past, it sounds like they've been done in the evening. And so just based off of marketing from the school, and families may come in with their kids and they do panels where people are able to have conversations with the representatives from the different organizations or companies. But the attendance has really kind of varied. And so...
The reason that I'm asking is that one of the most powerful tools that I think is out there is teaching kids how to do and encouraging them to do simply informational interviews with people who are out there as professionals. People seem always willing to talk about, this is what I do for a living and this is how I got here. This is what I would recommend. And it makes it really, really tangible for the student. It helps them really drill down. And I wish that there was more of that stuff going on, and both informally and formally. So I wonder if, people coming in for 3 hours at night and getting 20-minute segments where students can sign up and have that conversation. How'd you get here? What did you do? I just, as another way to get them thinking about what options are available.
We used to bus everybody to Northern Essex.
It used to be a really big, robust...
Huge thing. Everyone would be bused to Northern Essex. It would be, a pretty long, at least a full morning. And it would be divided up into various, this legal, medical, and
the clusters.
And then the clusters. And then you'd have a team of people in each of those classrooms. The problem is you didn't have enough time because it was so quick. And so you had students could only pick 2 clusters. And then you never had a chance to repeat it to see if you wanted to go back and learn others. But, I thought that was had a lot of potential in terms of helping to give more information to students.
I guess I've done those in the schools. And I think we may be a big enough town where people could go. I guess I'm thinking about the middle school, really, just get them earlier. But to go into the school and everything from musicians to stock advisors,
lawyers,
and whatever you want, everybody comes in and you can sign up for different sessions with different types of people.
Let kids sign up in small groups, so that 3 kids that are interested in law will sit down and talk to a lawyer for 20 minutes or a half an hour.
All 3 of them.
What?
Did you say the 3 kids?
Yeah, 4 kids.
I think we've done a variety of things, but currently not as much as we used to. We used to have a career day at the elementary school where the kids got to meet all kinds of people from all different careers.
Thank you.
And we used to do the speaker series lunch at the middle school, which was very much what you were talking about. So the kids would go and eat lunch with someone who had a career that they were interested in, and it was just conversation over lunch about the career. And
I know that the civics classes bring in somebody in 8th grade. They bring in people every week to talk. But that's more about civics, not about careers. But there are a
lot of work to do in terms of
I'm just saying, but there are a lot of models. Like you're saying, there are a lot of models to.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's the big vision. That's part of the reason why we're reestablishing a lot of the work with the Rotary and the other businesses to eventually down the road to set up a comprehensive internship program, but also ties into a lot of the work that Andy's starting with the career pathways, from the program of studies to the students understanding their learning style, their profiles, their learning styles, to then start selecting career paths. So it all ties together eventually, because, that's, there's two areas that we would really like to see is students taking college level courses, and two, having a work experience before they leave, a true work experience. And there are a lot of different models out there, for the career days, but it all needs to really tie into a lot of the work that Andy's already laying the groundwork with. And as part of that, in the spring, we'll be taking some groups out and looking at different career days and internships. But I agree. I think that we're in this together, and we have a great, just from the NEF and the support and the businesses, we already have a lot of support here that we could really do something special for the Newburyport Public Schools. So.
And actually, I want to piggyback on that, because the meeting that we had today and working, I think it's an offshoot of the NEF or the BBC, because it was Shelley D. Simone and then Art Courier, because they're working collaboratively with us. And you can see that the amount of support from the community to help us do something like this, because the idea is to do the career fair, because they brought that up, how there was one done at the Northern Essex Community College years ago. But that involved multiple schools, and that we should be, our objective is to be able to do that here for our kids and using our people from the community, but then really kind of teeing us up where we're teaching kids those networking skills, because that's really what allows you to persist when you can reach out to people, because you don't have to have all of the answers.
This would be really good to add on early release days, right? To do these kinds of career
interesting idea
at the high school or even the middle school would be that would be a great way to roll in the business community to work with students.
Mic drop.
Incentivize some attendance too.
What?
Could I interject
Sure.
with a huge career day that we did years ago at the high school? We took the whole junior class on 4 buses out into the community. There was a huge amount of businesses that opened their doors, logistically moving a whole class of students that chose 5 different places that they could go. And they were back at the high school at noontime to eat. It was Emmett Goggin, Cheryl York, and I stayed till 10 o'clock the night before, deciding what kids were on bus 1, and then they dropped them at various places, and all the buses dropped kids at different places. Then they were picked up and dropped at other places, and picked up and dropped at other places, and some kids got off the bus and on the bus, but the amount of businesses that opened their doors to these students, and each of them gave about a 20-minute presentation to the students that came in. It was phenomenal. The kids just had a great day within the community. Like I said, though, logistically trying to find, and we made it work. I don't know how we did it, but we did it. And we only did it that one year because the hiring of the buses really kind of, was a nightmare. It was a lot of money to spend on buses.
Yeah.
But the businesses
Really, it always comes
thought it
back
was
to
a
that.
wonderful
Always comes
thing.
back to the
Really,
buses.
it does always come back. It doesn't matter what you're talking about.
Transportation. But no, that sounds like a great thing also. To really kind of wrap up around all of this. And so I think one of the big pieces of work in terms of our responsibility up at the high school is, I think what I've learned is there have been a lot of great things that have been done, especially around kids exploring options or this or that. But the problem is, and actually the kids kind of called us out at the school council meeting, is they aren't able to connect all of the activities, because they may do an interest inventory, but then it may not be revisited with them. So there's no systemic approach, which is really a big piece of our improvement efforts, is how do we create a systemic approach so that kids so the advisors are aware of how kids are progressing along with themselves and understanding what their strengths and interests are. But then it's really the kids are connecting all of these activities that we're doing with them to their ability to kind of construct a bigger plan for themselves. But then also my responsibility as the principal is getting that out there to the family so parents are aware. Recognizing that kids aren't always necessarily going to share things, with their parents at home, but if we're at least explaining to parents what the purpose of our advisory program is, they can then engage, with their kids. I can see it now just in terms of walking in the cafeteria and then going into the library, just how much work our seniors are doing to try to get all of their college application stuff in gear, but the goal is to get kids started earlier, so it doesn't all get kind of muddled together in just a 2 to 3 month period at the start of your senior year. That work is really starting their junior year, which can take a huge load off of kids. And then ultimately, in terms of the attendance, the more that we continue to improve our overall kind of culture at the high school, because that's one of the big objectives. So first of all, that kids feel like they actually have a voice in school decisions, because we've done our diligence to provide the structures to allow them to have a voice, and they see that we're listening. That's a big piece of it. But then also at the same time, very similar to what Sean's trying to model for the whole school system here in terms of the recognition. So us as a high school, creating a culture that's founded on recognition, so that all kids, are getting that feedback and then acknowledge, hey, you know what, you're really making progress. And that's where an advisory program can really play a big deal. And so that kind of gives an idea of, so what I was hoping to accomplish tonight was give an overview of where we kind of got to with the school council. We are hoping to try to finalize what our improvement plan will focus on, but I think the feedback I received tonight also is very helpful, and I'll be able to give that feedback back to the council when we meet in a week and a half. So I don't know if there's any other questions based off of any of this.
Just a comment, Andy. I'm really pleased that the school council is so engaged in driving this. That's very, very encouraging, and I think it's very appropriate.
Oh, totally. Yeah, my job is to facilitate what the discussion is around, provide the data, listen to their feedback, and pull that together to drive the school. So.
Great. Yeah. Terrific. Thank you.
No, thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks.
The next item on the agenda is the Beacon Coalition update from Mr. Callahan, who is not here. So I'm assuming we will get another Beacon Coalition update when he is here. However, I would like a moment to talk about the CREST Collaborative, which Steve started as our representative serving on the CREST Collaborative, and I think if I recall, Steve, those were the bad old days for the collaborative.
There was some transition going on here.
There was a lot of transition. That transition has taken place. The last couple of years that I have been the representative, they have completely turned around financial issues. They are dealing with their building issues. They went from a very significant deficit to actually running at a surplus this year. The surplus is not going to rise to the level where they need to redistribute it back to the districts, but it is going to be very helpful in terms of new building, new programs that they're initiating. The executive director is very dynamic. It was really a pleasure for me to work with some of those folks. And the reason I'm saying this is that Sean starts in January with them. Which I think is really good. And I gave him a bunch of information about the annual report.
There's an assessment on this next Friday.
Yeah, there is. You'll have to do it with them, though. But I appreciate having had the opportunity to represent Newburyport on the collaborative, and I'm really pleased with. It's just they're very dynamic and very professionally run now. So great. Thank you. Assistant Superintendent's report.
Okay, my report won't be too long, but I did want to tell you about how our work with Billy Donegan, who is helping us build skills-based teaching and learning programs here at the school.
We get a few volunteers.
We did get a few volunteers. When I had told you that Billy was coming, both Sean and I had told you that she was coming for our release day, and she came and she gave a keynote talk to our staff, and then we just asked for volunteers. Teachers that thought they would be interested in being a part of the first cohort to do this work with Billy, and we had 82 teachers stay who were interested, and that was so exciting to see that that many people were interested in taking this on. And at this first level, what will happen is the teachers will work with Billy to really build one skills-based unit, and they're going to develop a rubric that they'll use to drive that unit. They're going to look at what kinds of skills need to be revisited or scaffolded throughout the unit. They'll be looking to match their grading methods and tools to the learning rubric that they'll be using. And then, Billy's really hoping that she'll be able to capitalize on the work that we've been doing around the strategic plan over the last several years through our PLCs, and help teachers who are ready to run with some of those ideas and incorporate it into a skills-based model. So that's all really exciting. But when we looked at the 82 teachers, we really didn't want to discourage anybody, but that was going to be really hard to go as deep as Billy had hoped to go with the first cohort. So principals went back to the schools and really talked to all of the teachers who had volunteered and tried to develop a system for the school around it for the first cohort. And so where we've landed now is 45 teachers in total that are going to be a part of this first cohort. At the high school, we have 3 history teachers, we have 3 biology teachers, and a special education teacher that works with the science department. We have 2 physics teachers, 3 English teachers, 2 math teachers, and a special education teacher that works with the math department, and the ESL teacher. So that's, there are 16 total from the high school. At the middle school, we have 4 6th and 7th grade history social studies teachers. We have 3 English language arts teachers, and then we have an art teacher, a tech integrator, a music teacher, an interventionist, and a special education teacher, totaling 12. At the middle school, the Mullen School has 2 4th grade teachers and 3 5th grade teachers participating, a total of 5. And the Bresnahan School has 1 kindergarten teacher, 5 first grade teachers, 4 second grade teachers, and 2 third grade teachers, with a total of 12. So the way we're going to manage that is in 3 cohorts. We're building a elementary cohort, a high school cohort, and a middle school cohort. But because the numbers at the high school are large, we may combine a couple of those teachers or a few of those teachers into the middle school cohort, because one of our biggest challenges around this, and one of the reasons we knew we had to bring the numbers down, is we don't have enough substitutes to have all of those teachers out in our school for 3 consecutive days. So that, pardon me?
Release days.
The days?
Yeah.
When are they?
No, those are release days. Those are release days. Like, you're going to release teachers from the classroom.
Yes, we are. We are. Yes, I'm sorry, David. I didn't understand what you were asking.
It's not during PD time or PLC time or any of that other stuff.
It's their release days, because she needs 3 full days, all day for the 3 days, for them to be able to do this work. So our first cohort is going to be the elementary cohort, and that is going to run January 23rd through the 25th. The second cohort is going to be the high school cohort, and that is going to run January 28th through the 30th. And then the third cohort will be the middle school cohort, and that is going to run January 31st, February 1st, and February 4th. And there's a weekend that breaks up those 3 days. So that's how they're going to get started. Those teachers will build a unit that they want to implement this spring. They'll implement that unit this spring. And then the second phase is that they come back during the summer. And they're going to be able to work with Billy again around how that went. But when they come back, we're looking for the people who are ready to build a skills-based year. So they'll start the work with Billy at the beginning of the summer. But the really exciting part is we also encourage each one of those people to bring a colleague or a friend with them who will build their first unit for the year. So they get to work with the person who was in the first cohort. This is going to be the beginning of the second cohort. They'll work collaboratively on building that first unit. The person in the first cohort will continue the work and build their units for the year. And it's really exciting. You know, Billy describes this as the viral effect. You know, the way that you just continue to build the cohorts and the enthusiasm of the first cohort and trying to bring a colleague along will really help build the second cohort. So we were so excited with the interest. We were so worried about discouraging anybody, but knowing that the second cohort will start pretty quickly on the heels of the first, I think that everybody felt comfortable about the people that were chosen and tried to represent multiple disciplines so that then those teachers could bring their friends along. So we're really looking forward to that work, and the teachers, as you can see, were very responsive to working with Billy. And then the other thing I just wanted to tell you about was I'm very pleased to say that the district review evidence was submitted on November 14th. And we have a planning meeting with our liaison for the visiting team on December 10th. And during that time, they'll determine the focus area for the review. And, you know, as we've explained before, they'll pick one of two areas. One will either be student-focused, which will focus on curriculum instruction, assessment, and student support, or the other will be leadership, HR, PD, and finance. So they'll determine from our self-assessment which one of those they're going to focus on, and we'll learn that on December 10th, and then we'll plan for the site visit, which is January 7th through the 9th, and we'll create our schedules, and we'll hear from them about the kinds of classrooms they'd like to see, the teachers they'd like to interview. They would like to speak to school committee members. The people they want to interview is extensive. I think they want to speak to other city officials. They'd like to talk to a lot of people. But we're going to learn more about that when they come for the planning meeting, and we'll keep you informed as that progresses.
Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Do we foresee any struggles with discrepancies in teaching approaches next year? So if I have 3 out of 5 teachers in a grade level doing this, and 2 out of 5 doing this, I could see that becoming, if done correctly, becoming a very different experience for these 2 kids.
Right, so as part of that, as part of this process, I think it's important to communicate that, you know, to parents. That especially, I went through this process, we worked with our entire faculty, and it's so beneficial to the teachers that I'm really excited for the opportunity. Just because it's going to shift, it will shift some strategies in the classroom. So you'll have some, down the road, some classes that will be fully skills-based, and you'll have some teachers that their classes won't look the same, and you'll have those conversations where parents are like, well, why can't you do this? And so that's what we always communicate with the parents is this is a process, and there's got to be like some time for us to get people working together.
I remember the Bresnahan a couple years ago sent out a notice, parents actually asking for a preference. At the time, I think we were considering departmentalizing pieces of elementary school instruction. So would you be okay with, or even prefer, having multiple teachers during the day, or would you want to be in like the same sort of classroom? Like I don't think we did, but picture like when Engaged New York Math came on, if we would have said, would you like to try a new math curriculum, or would you want to stay, like are we even thinking about getting that far?
I don't think so.
Noting the discrepancy?
No, I think we got to work with the staff first and kind of see where we're at going into next year and then the year after that. But I think it's just really, once everyone's working together, then it's really just to communicate to parents on a regular basis that, we're looking at those 21st century learning skills and really having what's really exciting for me and being in all the classrooms and seeing the wonderful work that our staff does on a daily basis. This isn't like an add-on. This really is gonna just help enhance a lot of the great work they're already doing in the classroom. So that's why I really believe once that first cohort goes through and then works with those units that they've developed, it's going to be a lot of excitement within teaching ranks. So it's almost like a good problem to have down the road if, as we start making a transition to that.
I think too, all the work there's been such good work that's gone on over the last 3 years. And Billy walked through the door and said, I can show you how to pull that all together.
Right.
And put it in front of your kids every day. And I think that's why we had such a huge response to it, because we have been reading about, best practices. We have been thinking about how to do business differently. We've been talking about it, and we've been doing some of the work in small pockets. And when she came in and said, you know what? I know how to pull all those pieces, help you pull all of those pieces together and make this make sense for the kids that are in front of you. Our teachers are ready, and that's what I think. The timing is really right. And I think it's a result of some of the work that has led up to this. Would you agree with that, Gary? Yeah, I just feel like people were like, yes, okay,
right.
It's time, so.
Okay.
Yes. So the answer to that question, yes.
Superintendent's report, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, I'll start with, we've been here for a while, but I'll touch base on some wonderful things. But the first piece is the Copart High School. Just wanted to give everyone an update as I'm coming into this. So I guess we're in our third phase with the renovation of that, and Steve Burkholm would like to go out to bid for or have the architect put a bid together for us to continue the process of the restoration of that phase. They want to do a survey first, because I guess there's been some time between the original estimate until today, whatever, the next bid that's going to go out. So when it does go out to bid, it's going to accurately reflect the costs. And I told them I would pass that message on to the school committee. Yes.
Okay. He had 2 rounds of community preservation funding.
Yes.
And he didn't apply this last time. which I didn't understand because we had money that still didn't get spent in this round of allocations. So do we have a ballpark of what we're talking? And are you coming to the city for capital funding for this?
So Steve says overall they have a budget of $198,000. And this survey budget carries $18,000 for architectural services. So the new proposal for them to do the survey would be $23,000. So it would be an increase. And he's, in his information back to me, is within the $198,000 that the cost, the architectural services are in there. So that is an increase of this survey because of the timelines.
So
I'm not sure if that,
It does, so I guess it's because he hadn't spent the money that he had from all the CPA funds that he didn't reapply for additional funding. So he has funding in place, is what you're telling me. And that he's going out to, has he checked with other architects?
I'm not sure. I can get more details.
Well, if he has been using this architect who has
I think it's the same
a deep
person.
knowledge
Right.
of this whole process,
Right.
it makes no sense to change. It just, really? $5,000 more?
Well, I think they'd like to do the survey because before they send it out, they don't want to send it out to bid and it comes back.
Oh, I understand.
Yeah.
But I would like to think that the architect could pick up where he left off and just add to that. So why is it $23,000?
From 18 to 23. That was an estimate.
Well, I'm just saying, it just seems to me that if this is the architect he's been working with, he should have a baseline and then he just wants to,
Just
seems a lot of
rerun
money.
the numbers. So, just so that I understand, there were just 2 points I want to understand. I don't know if you have the answers, this is maybe Steve's. But one is that the increase in the architectural cost is $23,000, but the initial budgetary estimate of $198 doesn't change as a result of that. Or does it go up by?
It could.
Right.
Okay.
Depending on what comes back, right?
Okay.
Was this
I can.
And is that,
I would.
a budget, and I'd like to think of the budget and then the funding for the budget. So I'm unclear as to whether he's got $198,000 in the bank or he just knows that it's $198,000 to do this.
That's what I'm concerned about.
That's what I'm
Is
not
that
clear on.
CPA money he hasn't spent?
Yeah.
Or is that money he
Why don't we table this and then I can get more information?
Yeah.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah.
Was that a renovation of the high school?
The cupola.
The cupola.
The top.
And that we need more information from the facilities, director of facilities, and it will be discussed further next meeting.
All right.
Anything else?
Now,
That's it?
sure. Now, just some of the good news now. I thought that was a formality, but we'll get you those details. All right. So I've been, just a few things, just having great conversations. I was with the high school parents and kind of a little focus group and focusing on, some of those 4 areas we've been talking about, the strengths, the areas of growth, opportunities and hope that parents have for the district, and then really tying in the graduate. What are the skills that parents feel that our students are going to need upon graduation? And that's from a pre-K all the way to 12 question. So that's been great. I'm also going to follow up with a survey to everybody. I personally like to work with people, but I want to give opportunities for everyone to have input on some of those essential questions as I develop in my entry plan. Web design, we've been working with Catapult, really changing, I think, the face. So it's going to be, when you go to the web page, it's going to be a lot easier to find things. And that was something we really focused on. Keep it simple where people, can find all the information or go to the right information. We're going to be sharing that with the extended leadership team. And then after the district review, we felt, because we may get recommendations to add things to different, whatever it's policies or different notifications as part of that review. So we want to make sure we have everything in place before we upload all the information, and we'll be sharing that with the community probably sometime after the holidays. I think we should be in good shape with that. The Veterans Day ceremonies, this was a couple weeks ago. I'll tell you, it was just amazing what the NOC did. It was a very moving ceremony. It really just hit home on Veterans Day and how lucky we are as a country. And I had the great opportunity to go to the Bresnahan in that assembly where all the veterans were here and being recognized. And I think it really it tied in to the day for all students of what Veterans Day is, and just really giving back to the community. And it was really well done. Some of the best assemblies I've been to in my career. So congratulations to the staff and students and our vets. It was a great day. Very, very meaningful for the students. We continue our learning walks. That was at the Mullen, and just continue to be in the classroom is one of our focus, to make sure we're focused on teaching and learning as a key goal. Another impressive performance, the Anne of Green Gables. That was the student-led play. And I saw them rehearsing some days after school, but when they pulled it all together, just amazing. So talented. I mean, it was so talented. Student actors and performance and the parent. It was just it's a great community night. And what you forget sometimes is when you see them act, they're playing roles of adults. So after the fall play, and I was all excited. I wanted to go up to these students, say, I'm just so proud of you. But you forget there's still I'm superintendent, like, hey, that was great. And they're like, oh, thank you. And they were just, acting as adults. It was awesome. And couldn't be more proud. What was even more impressive than the work that they did for that is they want to set up time with the 7th grade class. And they kind of want to, and Principal Furlong is going to allow this, for them to work with the 7th grade class, for them to do a student-led play next year. It's almost like a tradition being passed, which to me was just even more impressive than, they're great performers, but for them to want to give back and tie a legacy into this, it's just impressive. So
we should help them just as a note, we should maybe help them get a better time slot than 5 in the afternoon on Thursday for their next show.
I agree.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
A little bit of...
Yeah. The first time through, I think it was just really impressive. And then last but not least was the, I think I'm covering everything, but the NEF. I just think the last 2 weeks of my superintendency is it's been awesome. We start off on November 6th with the staff and the PD. I'm going to the musicals and seeing our students perform and students taking leadership roles in that. And then I attend the NEF auction, and I just walked in just totally impressed. And the amount of funding raised is absolutely incredible. But to me, the lessons taken away of that was community commitment and passion for education in this community. That does not happen in a lot of communities, and it was just it's just as I said, the foundation of greatness is here, and my goal is to really just rally everybody, bring people together to achieve the things that we want to achieve, to be the exemplar district, not only for the state, but down the road for the country, where people want to come into Newburyport and see what we're doing. So that's our ultimate goal. And each week, the more I learn about this community, the more I get to work with students, staff, community members, people like yourselves. I drive home all really energetic and excited. So I love it.
I can testify to that because I usually get a phone call from him.
I'm in my car, I just had to tell you.
Yeah, right. So some great things going on, and just really proud to be here and be part of it.
Subcommittee reports, I guess finance is meeting tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow morning, yeah, 8:15.
8:15 here at the
Superintendent's office, yeah. Conference room.
I think that concludes our business for this evening. Do I have a motion?
We just wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving.
Yes.
You too.
Yes, you too.
Have a very happy Thanksgiving.
Go Clippers.
Go Clippers.
Gotta get those seat warmers out.
I know.
22 degrees, they said, or something.
They said it was going to be 6 with the
Wind chill, yeah.
It's going to be a cold Thanksgiving Day game.
Be a whole new line of spirit wear, right?
yeah.
And that new parka.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned. All right.
Yeah, it's a big deal.